had no way to get here.
And now that Robin is otherwise engaged, she's on housing.
That's right, she's doing the housing now.
So, yeah, now, because I think she was the driver.
Oh.
I'm not sure. But I think she was. Oh, no, she doesn't have a car, so no.
I know it's really room. They were mostly walking.
No, there was one. I can see her, but I can't.
All right, well, from what I see, we have everybody here. We'll go ahead and kind of do call to order and do the roll of everybody that's here.
Ellie's here.
Katie's here.
Josh Stewart here. Eric's here.
Maureen's here.
Staff's here.
Yeah. It's like-
Andrew has notified us that he won't be able to make it tonight due to a work obligation. So there's that. We will open with public comment. I suspect Pam will be.
Oh, I'm sitting by the candy.
What's your reward after you're done?
It's Rose's company.
Oh, good. I'm happy to do that for you.
Thank you. So my name is Pam Chapborn. I live a block or so from here. And I wanted to talk about the Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan and or Blueprint Boulevard. You know, planning is a profession and it's done a certain way. For an institution or a group or whatever. When you plan new work, there's a right way and a wrong way, and the city's doing the wrong way. So you don't take individual elements and collect input from various people about what they think about individual elements. That's the wrong way. The right way is during the concept definition phase, you prepare 3, 4, 5, 6 scenarios. And they usually have a range in cost from below to above what you think your expected cost is, and also in scope. Boy, we want all these things. Let's make a plan for that. But let's also say, be realistic that let's take an average road and then a low road. So in scope, it's big scope, cost, schedule, and risk and mitigations. Those are the 4 things that need to be presented for a fully integrated work estimate. Obviously, the work is not done in detail, but the integrated plan does give us a concept for each path. Because you know, you don't just build roads or you don't just gratify a certain business interests. You can't do just one. It's going to have an impact on the other elements of the city. And so you got to do integrated scenarios, and that's what institutional planning is. I've never seen the city of Littleton do it. So the Littleton Boulevard plan right now, the problem with it is that it doesn't have the scenario, as far as I can tell, that TMB came up with, which is the Littleton Boulevard remains basically for buses and cars, not bicycles. Because bicycles and buses, I'm going to tell you as a bicycle rider, I don't want to be on a street where there's a lot of buses going in and out. I can't, I'm not safe there. And there's nothing you guys can do to make that safe. This board came up with the idea of Powers being the parallel track that is prioritized for bikes and pedestrians. And then Littleton Boulevard for historic preservation, for buses, for that western view, for the low road. And think of the expansion for business of the area there. Go beyond Littleton Boulevard. One of the problems with our process is lack of vision. So if you include Powers and if you include the side streets, suddenly you have this wonderful scope in terms of what we could accomplish. I've never seen that scenario fleshed out, and that's a problem with the Littleton Boulevard thing that's going on.
All right. So we'll be moving into our discussion topics. We're gonna open with discussion and updates on Blueprint Boulevard, the project.
Let's wait for Kenneth to propose.
All right.
No, you're fine, Jen. You're
Hold,
good.
please.
No problem.
Well, Well, while she does that, hi everyone, my name is Zareen Tasneem. I'm a senior planner with the Community Development Department. Joining me here is Sarah.
Sarah Dusenberry, also a senior planner with the Community Development Department.
We are the project managers on what we are now calling Blueprint Boulevard, the Littleton Boulevard sub-area plan. Thank you for having us today. So today we'll be covering some of the basics of what this project is, going into the existing conditions findings that we have delved into the past couple of months, focusing really on the transportation and mobility aspects as is of interest to you guys specifically, talking about the public engagement that we've done so far on this project, and then we'll be talking about next steps that will be happening between now and the next time we'll be in front of you for another meeting. Okay, so what is Blueprint Boulevard? It's a long-term vision, goals, recommendation that will lead into unified land use code updates. That's our zoning code. And then it'll also create an implementation plan to guide future investment decisions. As you can see, it's a 2-year-long planning process. We have covered the existing conditions analysis for about the end of last year, the first 6 months of this year, some of which we'll be diving into later, as I mentioned. We are currently just in the beginning phases of the visioning goals and objectives of the project. That is spanning from the beginning of the summer up until this fall. Then we'll be going into focus area recommendations and then final recommendations. So there was a comment made earlier about concepts and what to move forward with. That's further down the line in this planning process. So that's will be developed later on in terms of the recommendations that were made in past plans, such as the transportation master plan and recommendations made in the comprehensive plan Envision Littleton that was taken into account during the planning integration process as part of the existing conditions analysis. So that is something that our team and the consultant team has already is aware of in terms of the recommendations that were made during those plans, covering some questions that were earlier. And then as part of the project, we have identified multiple project pillars grouped under economic development and housing, land use and historic preservation, transportation and mobility, you guys, and then streetscapes and green infrastructure, all of which are to build into a more comprehensive vision for Littleton Boulevard as opposed to focus on just one area. Since we know that when you make recommendations to one section, it affects other sections. So we want to take a more holistic view of how is this whole study area in order going to be. Okay. Speaking of study area, this map shows our overall study area highlighted in the orange dash line. We're taking a more focused approach on the gray dash area kind of around the businesses along Littleton Boulevard. We have defined the study area as from the railroad tracks to the west, all the way to the eastern boundary of the city, just past the high school and Epic campus. And then some couple of blocks to the north and then a couple of blocks to the south. As you can see, there's some landmarks highlighted on the study area to ground you in terms of where we are. We overlap a little with Littleton Downtown Development District, a little to the west of there. And then primarily we're focusing what we're calling the core focus area from about Crocker to about Broadway as part of this project. So now we'll be diving into some of those existing conditions that we found as part of the existing conditions analysis, and I'll hand it over to Sarah here.
So the transportation mobility section provide data and a needs assessment for multiple forms of transportation. This section really covers the pedestrian movement. It was found that the city area has gaps in the sidewalk network, whether via missing portions of sidewalk or areas that do not meet the minimum 5 foot required by ADA. To further improve moving through the area, to further moving through the area, especially, oh my gosh. Apologies for those notes, as you can get lost in them sometimes. To further improve moving through the study area, especially for someone with mobility restrictions, many curb ramps need to be reconstructed to meet standards. Sidewalks in the study area vary greatly in widths and are often, which is often related to location. Wider sidewalks tend to be along Littleton Boulevard and Broadway, while our narrower sidewalks occur most within the residential areas. This map notes where the sidewalks are missing. As you can see, they fall in those residential areas with some gaps really going up against Boulevard. As noted, sidewalk widths do vary greatly across the study area and were mapped to show the existing widths of all portions of sidewalk in the area. Pedestrian movement counts were taken from various points throughout the study area. The counts found the highest volumes at peak times occurred at Powers and Broadway, which is likely attributed to the high volume of student traffic. The peak Saturday volumes occurred at Littleton Boulevard and Crocker, which is most likely due to the number of surrounding destinations and comfort of walking in the area. Moving on to biking. The highest needs have to do with improving existing bike infrastructure and connecting the network to other facilities and trails. Essentially, this calls for creating a low-stress network that is intuitive and continuous and utilizes bike priority streets like those set out in TMP. To further improve the usability of the network, supportive amenities and wayfinding should be installed. And this kind of shows where the various existing bike facilities are located throughout the study area. So looking at bicycle movement in the area, the highest peak volumes are at Powers Avenue and Windermere Street. This area actually has a bike lane that intersects with a shared roadway. Due to this activity at the intersection, it was noted that it should be prioritized for improvements. The overall low bicycling activity in the city area is not solely a function of low demand, but may have more to do with the conditions of not feeling safe or comfortable in the area. Additionally, these numbers were taken in a cooler month, November, so ridership was likely a bit lower than is seen in warmer months, but is likely not tremendously more than what was found.
Can I ask a question?
Absolutely.
In biking, are you just counting wheel bikes or e-bikes and scooters and all of that?
I believe it was just bikes. What is the
That's
standard?
what we told them.
Yeah.
I would think typically they would count e-bikes as a
Okay.
bike also.
Yeah.
Scooters, I'm
That
not so
was
sure
part of
about.
it.
I'm not
Yeah.
sure scooters would be counted as bikes.
I do have a quick question on the data. Were these trips per hour, trips per like day? Like how was the count?
Yeah, so it was done at peak hour volumes in the morning and in the evening. So it was through a course of time. Let me get you that interval.
Was there a difference between your peak hour observations and your regular observations?
The observations were primarily taken at those peak hours, and also on like Saturday's midday peak. So I do not believe the counts were taken at outside of those times.
Okay.
And I want to say morning is thinking like rush hour type times. So taking a look at the bike and ped crossings, it was found that non-compliant curbs and push buttons would benefit from upgrades. The city's trail crossing guidance could be utilized to determining an appropriate upgraded crossing. Lighting intervals at lights that prioritize pedestrian movement prior to vehicular movement should be evaluated. Evaluation of additional cross sections and activating existing ones is also, of course, encouraged. And then actually potential kind of specific relocation of a bus stop at Fox and Littleton Boulevard because the bus does block the crosswalk at that stop when it also stops. And then this just notes the kind of various types of bicycle and pedestrian crossings in the area. Moving to transit, Littleton Boulevard has a high frequency of stops quite close together, which increases wait time for folks. Amenities at bus stops are also minimal and are more often non-existent. So this associated with that kind of longer wait times and long times in general between buses arriving, creates a really not frequent service, which means that riders not only wait at those stops longer, they're waiting at stops that have few options to address comfort.
Oh no. Sorry, I was trying to look up
Those
stuff
specific
in,
times at the after.
trying to do work in the background, not realizing that I'm reading this. Hold on. Okay. I'm gonna stop multitasking.
And then this map shows the two bus lines that run through the area. The 66 runs along Littleton Boulevard and has a frequency of about 60 minutes. So if you miss one bus, you gotta wait quite a while for the next one. And similarly on Broadway, the 0B is slightly more frequent at about 30 minutes between each bus.
Can I ask a small question?
Absolutely.
Anticipating the 20% reduction of RTD service, how is that going to affect those 60-minute stops? Do you know?
Specifics. Generally, I don't think there's, and correct me if this I'm wrong, I don't think there's any expectations of those getting shorter anytime soon. I don't know about
Longer.
Yeah.
The service would probably be reviewed before increasing it more than 60 minutes would be.
Yeah, I don't think
My
RTD
assumption.
does frequencies less than or greater than 60 minutes. Don't quote me on that.
Yeah.
We have not heard specifics about the service changes. However, I am looking it up to make sure that I'm not misspeaking. Yes, so we're, aware that RTD is going to have to make that like 20% reduction, but I don't think they've come out and said which lines
Yeah,
that would affect at this point.
thank you.
Yeah, no problem. So understanding how folks drive through the area led to recommendations around intersection improvements and traffic control. This entails slowing drivers down on Littleton Boulevard and at intersections to improve bike ped safety. Removing turn lanes is recommended to be evaluated to determine how that may impact movement and safety on Littleton Boulevard. Also, assessing the number of driveways and curb cuts on the corridor is highly recommended to determine opportunities to improve efficiency and safety. Moving at high speed and then stopping frequently definitely affects moving through the area and also higher likelihood of related incidents. And this looks at the various street types as called out in TMP, and then also the posted speed limits in the area, which we all know are perfectly or and next map. The map shows the various locations where the traffic and turning movement counts were taken, as well as noting the average speed, which are pretty much all higher than the posted speed. And then next one.
Just a quick question on that, it's like, when you have school zones versus residentials, are we seeing the same trend here where it's about 2 times residential traffic?
Say that again, just sorry about that.
So you got your residential measurements on hours, but you also have a measurement over there by the school past
Littleton High School.
But they're showing about 3,000 ADT while the others are showing about 1,500. Is this consistent with what we're seeing in the rest of the city? Because I know there's been a lot of discussion and stuff about a lot of people in school areas getting really congested. And like, is it different at high school versus the elementaries?
I think that reflects, that's a dead end road. for all intents and purposes. So I don't think that reflects anything about the school zone. I think it reflects its ability to carry people.
Well, and it's like really, unless you're living at the apartments or stuff, you're going strictly to the school.
Right.
So it's almost like a nice microcosm of school impacts.
I did not speak to how it relates to other schools, outside the city area. I don't know any, sorry.
Maybe something we could like look into
Yeah.
later on, but it is a useful piece of information if the schools are showing a consistent, burden for some of the discussions that we have.
Well, that's our the number of people who drive to Heritage, I'm sure, is much higher than the number of people who drive to Littleton. And Arapahoe's not our problem.
Yeah, I don't know if we can really make that. I guess we have to look at the data, but I think this is also, yeah, based off of like just the street grid, and so I think each school is just uniquely different. Because of that, so.
Is that 31 miles an hour on Littleton facing the school or on Broadway?
On Littleton.
The school zone on Broadway. No need for
I drive through there all the
that. Right.
School's also not like the first lot right off Broadway, so it's not worse.
Looking at some of the kind of peak volume movement, so at highest kind of peak volumes in the area, really not surprisingly are at the intersections with Littleton or with Broadway. So Powers Avenue, meeting Broadway and Littleton Boulevard, coming up with that. And then most intersections all the other intersections that were counted actually have less than 3,000 vehicles. Approximately 21,000 vehicles do run along Littleton Boulevard, which really supports the use of the corridor as that east-west connection on the kind of northern part of town. As I noted, speeds do increase above the posted limits and average between 5 and 10 miles an hour above posted limits. With the fastest speeds occurring along Littleton Boulevard, specifically west of Prescott. And as noted before, there is a high number of individual access ways to buildings, so those curb cuts and driveways, which in combination with the increased speeds does present those efficiency and safety concerns. And this is looking at the level of service for the area and was evaluated for a sample of intersections. It found that all intersections are overall stable, except at Littleton Boulevard and Broadway, which just means it has a lower level of service.
We do have a project at Littleton Boulevard and Broadway that is currently in design, that'll go to construction.
What's the lower
Next
level,
year.
Maybe 27.
lower level of service? It's like, what?
Can you go through what this is?
Yeah, level of service really looks at how kind of efficiently you're able to move through the area. If there's other kind of concerns and things like that, but also condition of the roadway as well.
So
I'm gonna look at also, I realized I didn't introduce Aaron.
This is an Aaron question.
Aaron. So I apologize. This is Aaron Human, our city traffic engineer. So I'm gonna let you answer.
Yeah.
So level service is based on an A to F basis. A basically means you have no congestion, you have plenty of capacity, cars are traveling through without a problem. As you get closer to the DE order is where we kind of say you're almost at capacity. When you get to a level service E, when you get to level service F, you're over capacity. So what that means now is if you're going through an intersection, you might have to wait through a whole cycle before you actually make it through because it's such a long queue of vehicles. So like when you're trying to turn left off of Broadway or Littleton Boulevard, I'm sure many people, if you've done a peak hour, you don't get through in the first try, you have to wait till the next grade. So what we shoot for most of our service area is level service D. We do allow movements to go to F if we need to at major intersections. So left turns usually is what will allow them to go to F before we allow the through movement, because that's more vehicles are making that. So we're trying to get more vehicles through the intersection as fast as possible.
And so I think it's fair to say that level of service is not an equivalent to a safety measure. However, there is trends with, you know, if a intersection is over capacity, there could be impacts to safety. Sure. Right, and queue lengths is another thing, and just, yeah, overall, you see more like rear end collisions. You know, I think we've given the example at like Federal and Burley, we redid that intersection, and most of the crashes we had seen at that intersection were due to congestion. And so by making it more efficient, you are lowering the level of crashes. However, I will, correct me if what I'm about to say is wrong. I think what, you know, like we're okay with a level service D because we don't, if everything was going to be an A, we'd have to over prioritize vehicles and under prioritize like pedestrians and bicyclists. So that's where I think there's a balance, right? Of making sure that we're not creating too many congestion issues because those can create other safety measures or safety concerns.
So
So the balance
is.
Can you say that again?
This is really focused on the car.
Yes.
Level of service.
For vehicles.
Yes.
I would use this chart.
Okay.
What intersections are it?
So this is specifically the Littleton Boulevard and Broadway intersection. It's a little hard to read on top of that table. And we couldn't put quite all the acronyms there, but that first one is basically saying eastbound left. Yeah, I know, I gotta write this down.
It says above 11 intersection evaluate, right, westbound left. I would encourage you to not use those acronyms.
Yeah, we were just pulling this from.
And I will say, this is very much in the weeds from a technical aspect. You all don't need to like understand what these tables mean necessarily.
If I don't show a table, you can't.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
I can't read it because I don't know what those are.
Okay, that's good to know. We weren't sure how in the weeds you guys like.
We like to be in the weeds,
Okay.
but it needs,
Okay.
it needs a little information to be interpretable.
Good to know.
And the full report does include a lot of that information out, but I understand with this moment, absolutely.
Some feedback on something would make this a lot easier for people to digest. Just turn it into a heat map. So somebody could visually see, you know, you have your service level F is like maybe not such a great color. You have green for your service level A, so people could easily visually go. They're not gonna understand the rest of the data like an engineer would, but I think one thing that would be kind of a statement I think would be accurate is like when you get to your E's and F's, when it comes to pedestrian, bicycle, and non-vehicular traffic, those locations are gonna be heavily restricted in the ability to have any pedestrian traffic, which would probably relate to some of the citizens' concerns with Littleton Boulevard and some of the current challenges with it.
It's the full report, public information.
No, it's currently still in a draft format, so it's still being finalized, but will be put out.
Expected by mid-August at the latest.
And that'll be posted on the Blueprint Boulevard.
It's on our project
And it
website.
will also be likely an appendix of the final plan as well.
Excellent.
So guess what? You guys are getting sneak peeks.
Kind of moving on to safety, as we've kind of already started talking about. Touched on a number of these, but in general, there are definitely a variety of solutions that should be kind of further explored to really understand the feasibility of how they might be implemented in relation to improving safety on Littleton Boulevard and in the surrounding neighborhoods. And this map does kind of show the crash history of just under about 6 years along Littleton Boulevard. Was taken from January 2020 to November 2025. And it calls out 6 intersections that have relatively high crash volumes. And then the next one, I'll go into a little bit more specifics. And so, not surprisingly, Littleton Boulevard and Broadway definitely have the highest number of incidences, which is likely due to that kind of, or partially due to that high volume at the intersection.
So that 78 is over a 6-year period, so we're talking 11, 12 crashes a year.
Yeah, I think it's just 2 months shy of 6 years. Or 1 month, I believe. And then Littleton Boulevard and Hickory Street was actually included Even though it only has 3 total crashes, it is the only fatal incident in the study area. Looking at the kind of types of crashes where they occurred, majority of crashes occurred at an intersection with broadside or T-bone being the crash type with the greatest frequency and likelihood to result in injury. And so this is just really looking at the various types of crashes involving both bicyclists, pedestrians, all the way to just cars. Majority of crashes in the area do result only in property damage only. So people are not physically affected. Obviously, we want to reduce those numbers, but the majority are with other cars that do not result in injury.
PDO is physical damage only.
Property damage. Property.
And so the last thing we're looking at is technology. And technology is really recommended to assist with improving pedestrian safety. So prioritizing signaled movement across an intersection prior to cars. And then also looking at improving it to improve signal reliability, maintenance efficiency, and better serve multimodal users. And then expanding data collection will also really help with understanding the use of the signals and any needs for improvements. And then this last image is actually from a different section, but I felt it was definitely pertinent because it does relate to movement and the components of the street that may impact movement, comfortability, and safety. So and we did this through documenting various typical street cross sections. So this is one of them, and it's just looking west at Littleton Boulevard and South Spotswood. In this area, you can really see that it does have a greater amenity zone separation from the street as well. And that's kind of what we have been kind of consistently hearing is that the western end of Littleton Boulevard is much more comfortable to walk through and kind of exist in. Are there any questions related to transportation stuff before we just kind of go a quick overview of the other focus areas?
Just a curiosity, but with the like taking advantage of data and technology and everything, I'm familiar with like a couple efforts. Like I know CDOT is working with a lot of communities to sync up their traffic control with CDOT's traffic control, trying to like be able to adapt to like accidents and everything else. Is that something that like especially near Santa Fe and maybe Broadway is going to be looked at?
So CDOT is only interested on their roadway system. So Broadway, Littleton Boulevard is not part of their system. But we still are putting a lot of data collection and different cameras out there so that we can see what's going on in our corridors. We actually, 2 years ago, we did our first fiber project on Broadway. And as a part of that, we added a lot of equipment to our different signals, upgraded all the equipment. We are going to be doing, later this year, we're gonna be starting the design of the southern half of Broadway. Same sort of thing. So from Arapahoe all the way down to almost C470, we'll be upgrading that, putting in fiber in, upgrading all the equipment at the signals. Again, adding more cameras and stuff and more data collection information. So from that standpoint, yes, we eventually want to work with CDOT to use part of their fiber system to create a whole ring around our community. So from that sense, we will be working with CDOT, but from a standpoint of them monitoring stuff in our city, yeah, it's pretty minimal. If anything.
And I guess the other piece of technology is like, people probably knows that Waymo made an announcement lately that they are in Denver doing active operations, and there's been a lot of talk about like robotic deliveries and other services. Has that been considered about how to incorporate that so that Littleton can take advantage of these new technologies and services kind of ahead of other communities in the Front Range?
I think the likelihood of, even if we had it set up so it was accepting them identifying Littleton as a priority spot to add something like that is probably pretty low. I mean, the fact that they're just trying to get into the Denver market shows you how far away we are for really to extending down to suburbs and stuff on a regular basis. That being said, we certainly don't want to create a situation where we include the ability of that in the future. So I know a part of like Project Downtown consideration was, what do you do with all the curbside stuff? The demand for both, Uber, Lyft type vehicles or, a Waymo would fit into that too. So considering, do we need space specifically for town? So it's being considered from that standpoint, but I would say there's probably nothing at this time that we're gonna do along Littleton Boulevard for the future.
Yeah, so as part of Project Downtown Design, we are doing a parking and curbside study, which is citywide. So specifically looking at downtown and Littleton Boulevard, but the policy recommendations will be citywide. So we literally just had kickoff, so I have nothing more than that to share with this group. But more will be coming from there, and I know Project Downtown is like one of the focuses of TNB, so more to come on that front. The other thing I wanted to mention with the fiber upgrades and upgrading our equipment, a lot of it is that like detection and the grid smart cameras is the brand we use, but it also allows us to eventually add things like leading pedestrian intervals, which allows like an all ped cycle before any vehicles go, so that as a pedestrian, you are try to be at least like halfway through the intersection before cars can go so that you have greater visibility. It would also allow us to add like bicycle specific signals in the future. So the fiber upgrades is kind of like the start of us being able to do a lot of these other multimodal technological upgrades in the future. Anything else?
No, I think that was well said. And, we did the whole Broadway corridor study, so we're being very mindful of that, of what it could be in the future, even when we get the funding to upgrade that system. Yeah, we'll have the technology in place to be able to do it, and the equipment we need. Just need the rest of the infrastructure, right?
And money.
I have a question on, I got two things. You delayed pedestrian crossing on the push button. It's been great at Broadway and Ridge, but it doesn't operate, I believe, across Ridge. It only operates across Broadway. And Ridge is actually, crossing Ridge is used probably more than crossing Broadway. And that right-hand turn going southbound on Broadway is one of the most dangerous intersections in all of Colorado for pedestrian and bicyclists. In fact, if that right-hand turn lane was just eliminated, we'd probably make people a lot more comfortable utilizing that area. But anyway, when we closed Littleton Boulevard down to one lane for all this construction, did we do any level of service and speed studies during that time to see how going to one lane affected Littleton Boulevard in that area specifically?
Unfortunately, it wouldn't be an apples to apples comparison if we got it during construction, because there's too many other factors with having cones and other things out there that affect how people drive. Plus, when people see construction, they'll detour to other places. So we don't know if the volume drops because there's construction, or the volume drops because people will go, oh, it's only one lane, I'm gonna find a different route now. So it's kind of hard to tell. So no, we didn't collect any data at that time.
Or if the volume stayed exactly the same and everyone just went slower?
Well, that's certainly one of the options we're studying at, for Littleton Boulevard is.
But that could be retrospectively studied with cell phone data that we have. We have that data.
You mean going back and using the big data to see what actually happened?
Right.
at that time?
You wouldn't, because that allows us to, we don't need to put out the traffic monitors to do that study anymore. I mean, I understand there's still issues with reliability of the data, but we can give you some information.
It could give us at least a sense of how much percent-wise did it drop in volume and speed during that time, or was there any kind of change?
Yeah, I mean, because, the issues, a lot of the issues you raised with lack of realistic, this changes in volumes, and that data would change, that would provide you information about volume. I did have one, but I'm interrupting you, Josh, sorry.
None.
I want to, responding to Derek, there's at least one council member who is very excited about Waymo and automated delivery. And so within the council, there's lots of discussion around making sure that our speed limits are what we want them to be, because autonomous vehicles have to follow the speed limits. And so that's why we are planning on having a conversation of saying that the default speed limit is 25 throughout the city, just to start establishing that. And then there are other council members who are, and I'm not talking about myself, but there are other council members who are super excited about 20. And so I would expect that conversation, and some of it is being driven by this conversation around autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, and one thing that I would like to see it eventually lead to is the ability to like supplement kind of like spot mass transit in a way that has a lot of cost savings because the autonomous transports don't have individuals that you have to pay to drive them. So they can actually at some point be more cost advantageous, but also can serve like a lot of low service areas where, you know, they need to go out and service like some people that may only need a couple trips a day, but they can be very adaptable in that capacity too.
Well, I think that, I mean, RTD has been paying for the ride share services in Douglas County. And I think there's I don't think they're gonna be able to sustain their support of that. So if any community wants to pick that up, they're gonna have to pay it themselves. But I have questions around just even your language, because that's not really mass transit. That's mass, kind of door, you know, last mile kind of stuff. And that trade-off between original goals of mass transit and that type of service, an interesting question for me.
Yeah, and I would say it's not a solution to it, it's a part of it. Because last mile service has been a big focus and a big interest point in a lot of communities, just for the simple fact that you can get like first mile, middle mile, okay, but the last mile is always the most expensive thing to get.
Well, I think it's super popular in Douglas County and they're working on expanding it. So our neighbors are excited about it.
I've got a comment just in terms of the pedestrian lead off. Just don't do it at the corner where Alamo comes up, because those cars are jumping on it, trying to get to 40. And so they come around the corner, and if you stepped off the curb, you're dead.
You're talking about the leading pedestrian interval? We wouldn't do that in an RFB at the flashing lights. It would only be at a signalized
Oh,
intersection.
and a signalist, okay. I'm RFPs, that one.
So I'm just gonna quickly kind of run through the other findings for the other focus areas. They all kind of impact each other, so it's good to know at a high level what's going on. So from a housing and economic development perspective, the area is not seeing as much population growth as other areas of town and the region, and is primarily populated by a younger, more diverse and cost-sensitive demographic compared with other areas in the city. Housing in this area is also diverse and tends to be older than other areas of the city, which makes sense in terms of development patterns of the city. This was kind of outside of downtown, the next major area to develop. And then retail and office-based businesses in the area have been maintained in spite of employment decline. And Woodlawn and a couple of the other kind of areas along the northwestern and eastern edges of the city area are likely the most viable for reinvestment. Looking at our housing affordability, the area has a lower median income than the rest of Littleton. This area also has a high number of cost burden residents, which means they're paying generally more than about 30% of their income on housing. And this is in spite of having actually a high prevalence of affordable housing options, with the houses being older and smaller. Out in this area, there's a lot more kind of what we call naturally occurring affordable housing, so they're not required to be affordable. Next. And then looking at kind of land use and built form, it found that the code, our unified land use code, which is our zoning code, supports a variety of mixed uses along Littleton Boulevard, and the areas zoned for multifamily have the most diverse range of housing types. Improvements are noted for things like parking minimums, increasing housing options, and then also transitions between commercial and residential areas, as well as kind of standards for how lots are, or buildings are placed on lots. I'm also going to pull in a little bit of historic preservation here. So the area's kind of built form is really heavily influenced by a high number of historic mid-century modern buildings that and about 9 different kind of mid-century styles are actually represented along the corridor across about 75 different buildings that are potentially historically significant. The city previously did what's called a historic context study on the buildings and found that about completion of that study, about 3 have been lost. That's since 2018, so 3 potentially historically significant buildings have been lost. And really through this plan, we will kind of look at ways to kind of preserve these buildings, whether through traditional or more non-traditional means. And then how future development can really fit in with those existing buildings while still allowing the area to really evolve over time.
They run away? How do we lose them?
They were demolished for a few other things. They're
Thanks,
demolished.
Ken. Ken, like my joke.
Oh, sorry, sorry.
Ken likes a good joke. I appreciate that.
Sorry about that.
Can I ask you a question about this slide? I interrupted, but
Absolutely.
did you finish? I apologize.
Yes, I did.
What is guide transitions and scale? What does that mean?
Yeah, so what that is as we know, Littleton Boulevard has kind of a really high level of commercial with residential that really backs up right against it. So we're looking at, can we better guide those transitions from probably larger commercial buildings, and scale being kind of size, form being the overall kind of style and type. So commercial buildings, as we all know, really clearly look different than most residential. So really understanding how we can guide those transitions between our more commercial areas and residential, but also in relation to potential new redevelopment and reinvestment, with kind of, and how that might impact potentially new housing and new developments as they transition.
A visual almost of how it flows.
Well, I think Littleton Brewing is a good example of that, right? Of, you know, kind of a higher density, like higher building form next to, right adjacent to residential. And so I think many people would argue that maybe that isn't the best transition in that location. And so is there a better way to transition that for future redevelopment?
It's actually funny. Right behind Littleton Brewing, there's a house that has a business attached to the front of it. So if you're really truly a transitional building.
That was actually surprisingly common mid-century. You'll see it a lot along Colfax. And that is, I believe, one of the buildings that was at least discussed in the context study.
What is the zoning currently in that area, like between Powers and Littleton Boulevard? That's not just small.
Predominantly, yeah, so it's predominantly small lot residential on the kind of eastern area, and either butts up against corridor mixed use or neighborhood commercial. The eastern end of Littleton Boulevard tends to be a bit more multifamily that comes down and touches there, but really that kind of northeast, northwest, and southern portions are small lot residential. I believe there's a little bit of medium lot, but it's predominantly small lot and multifamily.
And does it have any special zoning for that area, like some of our areas around downtown that could be old house torn down and already zoned duplex, or is it just small lot residential?
So the small lot, yeah, so it's just small lot residential, which allows for single family homes and a duplex via conditional use. So it would require a public hearing with the planning commission for you to be able to build a duplex in this area.
And the size and like the population of Littleton that is the need for the transition versus like the 7-Eleven that also backs up? Not as big, not as.
Yeah, so some of it's a lot of the kind of historic development occurred where the buildings and the houses were definitely butted right up against. So, or if there's ways as things get redeveloped to kind of better transition those differences. So that's why you'll see some buildings that are quite large next to residential already.
That whole north side seems to do that. Like
Yes.
it's not just.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so some of that too is kind of how do we move forward with having those better transitions and setting up for any potential redevelopment to also kind of move that way. And whether that's oftentimes that can be done through form and scale or potentially even different types of land use that kind of transition down. Thank you. So for this section, it really noted areas to increase parks and connections while enhancing what already exists. It also calls for exploring ways to improve our stormwater systems to make them more resilient and green, reduce impacts of heat and heat islands, and increasing the tree canopy and use of water-wise landscaping. This area has one of the highest it's probably one of the greatest heat islands and highest kind of heat factors in the city. So how do we start understanding how tree canopy can start to resist and help?
Yeah, we did a walking tour with council a couple months ago at this
May,
point.
yep.
May. And it, it's interesting too, like not only from like a heat island effect with trees and greenery, but also from like a noise and comfortability, talking about like detached versus attached sidewalks. And it's just crazy how much a tree lawn in between you and the roadway makes it just a completely different experience. I mean, I think I'm preaching to the choir in this room. But even from like a noise standpoint, right? Like it makes such a difference. And you could tell as you're walking along, like the western end of the corridor that has those, determined or established tree lawns and large trees versus like the eastern section where, us just trying to have a conversation on the walking tour was really difficult because of that.
Moving as far off in a parking lot as we could.
I would like to ask the board if we could let them finish their presentation and if we could hold out remaining questions till the end of the meeting. We do have a couple ball topics coming up that I would be expecting to everybody's schedule.
We are close to finishing, I promise. This is actually the kind of last area. So finally for the streetscape section, which is also has that image I showed previously, there will be a number of those as well for other street sections. But this really noted a number of areas to improve the comfort of pedestrians through mechanisms like wayfinding and lighting that also allow for an opportunity to really celebrate and honor the culture and history and art and identity of the areas. And so with that, I'm gonna hand back to you for kind of our.
Yeah, and fly through the last few slides so you can move on to your other items. So this is covering some of the engagement we've done with the community so far as of this date. We're defining it as the pre-urban design charrette phase of the engagement, which plugging in a little later is coming up next week. You, part of the stakeholder working group. Look at you guys. Speaking of stakeholder working group, we have representatives on there from the Transportation Mobility Board. Dave, I think you're participating as a resident on there as well. So they've been attending 2 meetings that we've had related to this project so far. We've also had a community-wide public open house in April where we saw over 75 attendees at the campus on Littleton Boulevard, which all coincided with our first survey related to this project, which sought feedback related to existing conditions. And then we moved on to the second phase of our public engagement, which coincided with survey number 2, focus on community values. This was built off that first phase of public engagement, honing it down a little more of like, okay, well, here's what we were hearing during phase 1. Let's focus a little more on what are some of the top things we heard from there and explore that further. And part of that phase 2 was that walking tour that was mentioned earlier in May. We also had a number of summer pop-up events at the 2 meet, greet, and eats in June and July. We had pop-ups at the Buck Recreation Center as well as Bemis Library in June. And some of the quotes that we heard from the survey number 1, as well as the open house related to transportation, can be seen on this slide. Overall, respondents felt that vehicle movement was prioritized on this boulevard as opposed to pedestrian and bicycle traffic, and that's something people would like to see a little more of, being more walkable. And we saw that as well in the second round of engagement. So as I mentioned before, we had selected these 16 values from the first round of engagement to bring forward to the community as part of the second round of, okay, of these 16 values we saw kind of coming out in the top from that first round, what 3 are resonating with you more? That was one of the exercises we conducted as part of the second round. And the top 4, or the 4 on top that are highlighted in orange, are the ones that were coming out on top from that second round of engagement that just wrapped up, well, sort of is wrapping up currently. As you can see, walkable and pedestrian experience is really coming out as number 1. And a little related to that is the safety aspect of people feeling safe to be able to walk or bike or along that boulevard. less biking, more walking. And then also supporting local businesses on there and also, valuing the historic nature of that corridor. So moving forward from today, as I mentioned, next week, we'll have our urban design shred, a 2.5-day activity that should be fun and thought-provoking. We have a number of items for you, for those participating to work through and build off feedback. Then we will move on to our third survey that will cover preliminary visioning and design concepts to get feedback on. And then we will be doing targeted stakeholder listening sessions in September, really trying to focus a little more on which communities or demographics are we not hearing so much from as part of our engagement efforts so far. One of the groups that we have identified that I think we would like to hear a little more from is those that experience accessibility challenges. We know the Colorado Center of the Blind is within our study area. I think that's a voice that we probably want to hear more from. Included under that would also be caregivers of small children would also fall under that category. People that move in a different pace than able bodies is one group that we've identified to probably target as part of that session. We anticipate our next stakeholder group meeting to be sometime in September, all of it, and during that meeting, we anticipate reviewing materials that will be that will be displayed as part of our second open house that we will be holding sometime in early October. Finally, we will be bringing all this engagement feedback to you all again as part of a presentation in October, what we're calling Milestone Presentation 1, as we will be taking it to not only Transportation Mobility Board, we'll be taking it to Historic Preservation Commission, Planning Commission, and then ultimately to City Council to let them know not only the public feedback, but also the feedback from the boards and commissions as well as. So with that, that concludes our presentation. Thank you all for your questions. If you guys have any other questions for us, we'll take it at this time.
Awesome.
I have one last question. Why Blueprint?
Yeah, so when we were, Blueprint
Branding.
Boulevard, when we were kind of talking about the kind of project team in the city on this project, we're talking about kind of coming up with ideas, and Blueprint, we felt really kind of captures that. It's a kind of a plan and a path forward. It also really supports and kind of calls on the architectural history as well. One of the kind of Littleton Boulevard is very significant for those kind of mid-century modern buildings and are really unique in the region as a whole and even country to an extent. So really just kind of calling on that as well as looking at kind of using that blueprint as that kind of path forward. So kind of covering a variety of things. The logo has those kind of lines that are used on blueprints, and there's kind of again help representation of moving forward, but also movement through the corridor and it being a heavy transportation. So just trying to capture as many of the variety of focus areas as possible.
I'd just like to check in with everybody, if anybody needs to like take a bathroom break, since we're kind of like at the halfway point or anything like that.
And I'll just throw it out there, since I'm gonna go to Mondays and Tuesdays sessions, if y'all come up with anything that you want me to put on the sticky note and stick on the board, send me an email.
I had one question, just because this includes Littleton Public High School. How are you engaging them to participate in the survey?
Yeah, so not necessarily within the survey, but the stakeholder listening sessions that I mentioned we were gonna do in September. The high school population was one of those like targeted demographics we're hoping to do a specific event with. Just because high schoolers are a little more of that voice we're not hearing from. I personally probably wouldn't think surveys when I was in high school. But yeah, we will be working with the school district to see how we can get a focused listening session with high schoolers.
And I had one other thing is how how is this going to connect like the Littles Trail or anything like that, like down through, you know, where we have the bike trail that connects to the path? Is that gonna provide like increased connectivity with that trail as well as the one that goes, I think is it Littles Creek Trail? It goes right by the Rose Garden.
Yeah, so part of the kind of exactly what the section was called, off the top of my head, Parks and Open Space Trails is looking at those connections and understanding the plan. Also, kind of as part of this plan, existing conditions to an extent did what was called kind of a planning integration report. So it's also looking at the various other studies that the city is already, studies, plans, ordinances, documents that the city already has, and how those can also influence or be built upon. So the kind of trail crossing guidance piece was also pulled in, and to kind of start utilizing and see how that can work. So yes, the kind of connections and making that a more kind of complete network and use is something that will be kind of will be looked at and probably have recommendations on how to move forward.
Okay, I did have one recommendation, not to waste any time, but at the Rose Garden between Stern Park and the Littles Creek Trail, I see a lot of people biking that very bumpy dirt road, and I don't know if that's even able to be.
So we actually have a grant through Arapahoe County Open Space to do a design for that.
Okay.
And so South Suburban is actually going to lead that design. That will start probably later this year, early next year.
From Stern.
And then we will have to identify construction funding, that South Suburban has so that it's part of their CIP plan. And so, it would go to construction, probably not earliest 28, 29, but it is in the works.
Great.
I can ask about the schools. So I know you're involving them in listening sessions, but how are you involving the school district in decision making and what actually gets recommended?
Yeah, so we will be working with kind of various groups to kind of sit down, talk with them, look at what we're planning, or kind of have come up with for the plan so far, and kind of getting that input. So they're not necessarily groups that are kind of consistent on this, like say, stakeholder working group, but there will be a handful of groups that we kind of meet with individually to make sure that we are kind of fitting in with what they are expecting for their own future, and then how it impacts Littleton Boulevard. Things like RTDs, and Dr. Cog is one of those as well.
We meet with LPS monthly, so if you ever need to come to those meetings, we have a captive audience.
I would really like to see them a part of the decision and not just you listening to them and making decisions in that vacuum. So, because that happens a lot.
I would say that the COO said to me that the relationship with the city right now is the best he's seen.
I agree, but there's things that happen, decisions that are made without the input, or they listen to the school district, but they don't involve them in the actual decision-making process, and that's a shortfall.
I assume you're talking to DDA.
Yes, the LDDA is also on the stakeholder working group as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
See you Monday.
I can keep rolling, answer your question.
What do you got, right?
I just want to like work in like a chance for people. As it's been expressed as something that should be.
Thank you. Yeah. Perfect. Okay. Study session. Yeah, so as everybody has seen in our last presentation and with the memo that we posted to the website and got in everybody's hands, we are putting together our recommendation memo to the council. And twice a year, we will make recommendations, have a study session, like have a scheduled engagement with the council, and we kind of will push what the board is looking to see happen, what's recommended, what priorities we want to see, and this is that. Has everybody had a chance to review it and to just put their thoughts together and everything? So how I will go through this, I will kind of do a brief walkthrough,
And then, kind of go through and after that, allow individuals to kind of provide any input items, and then I will take that feedback, incorporate it into the memo, shoot out one so that we can get something kind of like finalized and submitted to council, and that is due on the 22nd of next month or 20th or something like that. You guys need by like the 14th.
Please. I think I should know this off the top of my head. Okay. Yes, so we need all materials, so that includes both the memo and the slide deck. I think we put by August 14th. Staff needs to get that, we'll compile it, and then we have to submit to the clerk by the 18th. So the date you all need to know is August 14th.
And I will put together the slideshow, which will effectively just be hitting the points of the memo that we present and give us points for particular discussion during that period. So, all right, Kenna, if you could just kind of zoom in for anybody's looking at this from or anything. So the memo here, like the opening statement, kind of us just presenting ourselves to the council and everything. How does the board feel about going through all the things that have happened since the last memo and kind of like various activities that we are doing? Do you feel that that would have good standing with the council? Because it will take part of our presentation time. Because we have two options, like we can make it to where, you know, we kind of give them a summary of what we've done and then present our issue, or we can also allocate all the time for the particular issues too. So
Why can't the memo have this on here?
Yeah.
that's also another.
Yeah, that's, I think.
Yeah, I don't think we need to verbally rehash in the session. Like, if that's your question, right? Like, do we need to, as part of the session, go through everything we've done? Yeah. I think if it comes out in the memo, that's fine.
I think it's good to also just remind council what we are working on and focusing on, so we have that front of mind. I forget sometimes, like.
I'm just taking notes. Okay, so once we get done with our updates, just a quick thing, we worked on like the transportation master plan. We've done a number of public engagement, front range, rail, and other efforts. I do need to put in a number of updates on Project Downtown Boulevard. We also have the sidewalks, transit, and funding. Just if anybody has any questions, please feel free to look at a lot of our previous meetings, or if it's something that you guys want to bring back up for discussion or anything, just let me know. We'll get in, work in the schedule. Okay, so the first topic that we're going to talk about is part of the presentation. The council is going to be on sidewalks. Now we are focusing on a neighborhood connected trail system as a way to prioritize some of the changes that we want to do with sidewalks. But it is the first step in what we see for our whole complete system. The city has quite a few like neighborhood connectors and everything. And in some of our previous board meetings, we talked about like street classifications and how there is a limited number of them, but that could possibly expand to serve other purposes. And this is like one aspect of like what it needs prioritization. Like say Ridge needs to be something that serves the inner community and not traffic trying to transport through would be, you know, a way of framing that. But we also want to see sidewalks where, you know, two people can walk side by side on the sidewalk, which is a challenge in front of the city. And like say somebody has kiddos on a bike or a little baby kid, or, you know, there's some older individuals that may not be able to traverse difficult terrain, or say there's people that just want to go bike, or they could be kiddos, that could be older people, it could be everything and all the other forms of mobility that we have. So what we're kind of like brought back together and what is the, like, something where you can have like active traffic going two different directions, two people passing each other in two different directions, which is a shared use path, a multi-use path. And typically in the region, they've seen about 10 foot is what is needed to do that safely. So like you can have a biker going one direction, two people walking side by side going into traffic and such. There's also potential avenues of like novel solutions, like say we have a street that the right of way is so constrained, you can't widen the sidewalk. Well, maybe we look at like parts of the street or something like that, you know, start exploring novel ideas to use what we have to help frame what could and should be in the future.
I think we just need to really brand it as a trail system along our neighborhood connectors.
And probably the other thing, which I've heard extensively, is people gotta feel safe on them. And, you know, no traffic, no trees, no curbs. Car hits that, it's not really hard for a car to swerve. But if there's physical barriers, that all of a sudden becomes much more difficult in terms of like preventing pedestrian harm or allowing people to feel safe. Now, as Josh said, it's like, we do need to brand this because people, like, if you just tell them sidewalk, they're thinking any old thing. So we need to like push this as like what Littleton sidewalk is compared to the any old thing anywhere else but Littleton.
Yeah, I don't think we call them sidewalks. I think they're obviously used for walking, but yeah, this is our trail system, expansion of our trails.
Well, it ties back into what we've been pushing for, and that is to link up all the bike
Yeah,
trails and
internal.
sidewalks.
I mean, everything, right? We've got the great,
Yes, yeah, connect our trails to the houses that actually want to get to them. Yeah.
Council would take all these 3 maps and
Trails.
make them trails.
Name them after yourselves. We're gonna have the Riker. Trail.
Riker path through Aberdeen Village. It's paved and concrete.
I'm gonna be a constant advocate for the Ralph Moody trail system. So he's my little hero.
Thank you. And I do know.
I'll get you the book, Kenna. I'll
I was gonna say,
buy
I don't
everybody.
know this.
I'll buy everybody Little Brit.
Little Bridges Trail System.
Little Bridges Trail System or the Ralph Moody Trail System. I'll buy.
Who is Ralph Moody? Because I know he was a school that we used to have.
This about like time during, what time period?
For the turn of the century, but Little Bridges was the ranch over by Loretto Heights. Man of the families when he lived in town.
Oh, cool.
I'll buy you all books. We can get them they're really good.
It's a little closer to home than Damon Runyon, so.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, I closed Ralph Moody Elementary, but not closed Damon Runyon Elementary.
I think a Ralph Moody Trail up Windermere Boulevard sounds.
Thank you.
Fantastic.
Thank you. You're singing my tune. Singing my tune. Don't need to name it after me.
well, that's funny, because I was gonna say, I mean, I think in this, you know, when we speak to council, is a posturing, I mean, you know, what is, like, how do we tie in so that the council feels like it's a win for them as well, right? Like it's serving what their priorities are, what is their platform, you know, which obviously should be in service of the city, but you know, how do we kind of, what are the words they use? What do we see them talking about? And how do we make sure that vernacular shows up in what we kind of say back?
Well, I think one of the most important things about what we're recommending isn't so much the trail system itself, but like taking that incremental approach to it. I think that's really what we're trying to say to them is do this now while you're still actually on city council instead of approving something that's going to be done in 25 years. And so take the incremental approach, get good feedback, good design, and actually show that you're doing something for the city.
For the city, yeah, you know, the projects visible now are all those large scale. And so many of what's coming out too is like, so down the road, or facing like, talking about the downtown and stuff. But this has an action now with real impact now.
We realistically have $1 billion to sidewalk work, get everything up to compliance with today's standards with ADA, with what proper vision would be. So as they say, you gotta bite the elephant one bite at a time, one chew at a time. But that's where this kind of approach, and like in the second bullet that we have here, we kind of emphasize that incremental approach, because right now, the city's already started with pilot projects. You know, let's test a new idea that nobody has seen. But how does a pilot project get to the finish line, and, you know, how do we get that more wrapped up kind of like into a system that can be very easy for people to digest and stuff, but we want to see it also applied to like the sidewalk problems too. You know, it could eventually be adapted to quite literally anything in the city, but a pilot project is, as Kenna and Aaron can say, is much cheaper than going out with the CIP project. But when the CIP project goes, if the pilot project has worked out bugs, we know we get a good product that's gonna serve what the new vision of Littleton is, compared to trying a capital project and then finding, well, maybe that didn't work so well.
And getting to your point about rebranding, so my question is, do we get to skirt some of the technical rules on, I'll pick on ADA, and we all know that that's not what I want to skim, but if we call it a path or a trail, do we get some leeway as opposed to calling it a sidewalk?
Non-motorized space.
Having
What
it
we need to
around,
call it?
not having a complete.
Motorized.
I mean, I think,
You're not gonna get away from ADA.
Well, I don't want to, but when I, you know, the rules are sometimes so constrictive as to what we can do in some instances.
It's fully enforced, a lot of that flexibility is out the window.
Is a 10-foot wide street level protected, non-motorized space, ADA compliant?
That is not. And that's what we're confirming with legal for our Lottie Street proposals. Can that be done that way? And I think the way we're presenting it is it's not permanent, like it's a retrofit to accommodate for now.
and I think it limits how we sign it, essentially. But yeah,
I think what we need more than anything is talking points to the two main complaints, which are gonna be, how does this impact parking? How does this impact people's ability to access their driveways? That's what we need is talking points.
and
In the presentation.
No, as a team,
Okay.
quite frankly, if this is what we wanna do, we need share a common way to talk about. Because those are gonna be the concerns, right?
So this would obviously not impact driveways, it would be breaks and barriers for people that have right of ways to their homes.
Well, but it's the, how do I get my trailer back into my space?
And where do I put my trash can when trash is coming to pick up? And if you have too many driveways in a block, are you really providing enough protection at that point? Or are you having to create so many breaks that it doesn't feel like it's protected anymore? Those are all issues that need to be addressed.
We also have the evolving issue that a lot of people are using non-car mobility, whether it's like little boogie boards or the motorized, like the stand-up scooters, the motorized bikes, and having those on the street has proved not healthy for those that use it. But a lot of people are using it because there is no other answer.
Are we able to maintain parking in some of these areas on both sides of the street and non-motorized lane?
Not likely.
What is that? It's like my street in front of my house is thinner by a large margin than what would be left over if we put one of these non-motorized lanes like on Windermere, for instance.
So, but you're talking about doing it without removing any parking. So let's say you have, I don't know what the Windermere width is, but we're laying it out right now. If you're talking about the section north of Ridge, if we're gonna be doing pavement management on Windermere all the way from Ridge to the northern end of the city. This year? Yeah, this year, yeah. And when we looked at the striping layout, we can fit bike lanes separate from parking lanes, but If you now combine the bike lanes, which is kind of what you're talking about, put them on one side, it creates a lot of issues with the interaction between parking and that two-way functioning non-motorized area.
I'm saying like bikes are okay to hit doors, but cars aren't.
No, but it's just, yeah, how much space do you need to allow for different things to function?
I think Windermere currently is about 55 to 60 feet wide from curb to curb.
I can look it up.
Yeah, and the street in front of my house is 36. We park on both sides and we drive just fine two ways of traffic. And so I know obviously I'm not the level of service that Windermere would be. That is 10 feet thinner than is left over after putting in a non-motorized lane. So look, just kind of curious about that parking argument. And then, you know, to protect those people that are parking and want to get out of their cars easier, do we need a double yellow? Does double yellow improve safety on these? Like double yellow, I think, reduces safety for people trying to park and get out of their cars. And so would this be a situation to not paint a center line?
On a road like Windermere,
Yeah.
certain roadways have to have double yellow.
What requires it?
It's usually the volume and how you classify the roadway. So I, just looking at Windermere, the typical section's 45, 46 feet wide.
What I
So
believe it.
start taking your, what you have to have. So let's keep the drive lanes at only 10 feet, right? We just lost 20 feet, so now you're down to 25. Parking needs to be at least 8 feet wide. So if you put on both sides, that's 16 feet. So now you're down to essentially 9 feet. So, you know, where would that mobility lane go then? You have to put on one side or the other, right? And is it possible? Yeah, but there's a lot of other things when you shift a road so it's not symmetrical. Now you have a problem with the cross slope on it because we always have, you want it to drain to the sides, right? So there's, if you look at it down the street, it's highest in the center, right? And then goes down to the drains on the two sides. Well, now if you shift everything, now you could have a car that's going over that hump, basically, if you think about it. And it can be an uncomfortable drive for people. That's an issue with how you do it. I'm not saying it's impossible, but we think to really have it be safe, right? 9 feet isn't enough because you need the space and you need the barrier in between, right? So now it's a really, either do you use the 2 or 3 feet and take it away from the 9 feet of your mobility lane, or do you take it away from something else? Well, we already went to the minimum on drive lanes and parking lanes, so where do you have space to take away?
Yeah, and
That's what we kind of run into.
Well, and I think the other thing, you know, like on a lot of what we, you know, doing a full study is we did parking utilization, and like what we found there is that you don't need parking on both sides of the street. And so I think part of that is that data collection of where can we reduce parking, right? And so if it's, you know, we only need 50% of the available parking, then we can only, you know, we can keep one side of parking and then have the other space dedicated to that shared on-street path with, you know, adequate spacing and buffer to try to get past some of that. But yeah, that just, you know, it also, once you start removing parking too, the amount of public engagement you need elevates to the next level, right? People get very upset about parking, but so I think it's just, you know, there is kind of like that, like studying and data collection before we can implement.
With, our right of ways are kind of off center when it comes to, on the east side and the south side of the streets, we own more of those people's yards than we do on the opposite side of the street. Would it make sense as policy to put these on the east side? And if we're removing parking to make it work in a temporary standpoint, a future design could mean we move into a yard 8 feet and you get your parking back. Would that be something that helps it be a little bit more palatable for those people that might be losing parking?
I don't know. I don't know if losing parking is more palatable or going into people's yards is more palatable. And then the cost of, you know, yes, we own that right of way, but the cost of having to do landscape removal and landscape like replacement to make sure that it looks okay starts to increase the price tag, unfortunately.
I'm curious where you got that from. What are you looking at that you think the east side or the north side is always?
All of our land maps.
South and.
The south and east is considerably larger. And I know this for a fact because I wanted to redo I wanted to build something off the front of my house and I was told no because there's not just an easement in front of my house, there's a right of way that comes 10 feet into my yard and that pushes my setback. And so I went and this was 10 years ago and I pulled all the plots for the neighborhood and that's true on all of current Littleton, the east side and the south side. It's a very large margin more than it is on the opposite side of the street. Yeah, so
Noticed that on projects we've been doing, but.
that's true, yeah, you can go
All
home, you
across
can
the
see
city,
it. Yeah, it's not easement, it's right of way.
Yeah, and we do own, most of our roadways, our right of way is beyond what is currently
Yeah.
defined as the roadway.
But it's 2 feet on the opposite side of my street, it's 10 feet on my side of the street.
And how much of that is also utilities that are being run through the community where you get them offset from the street so that they can be easier to maintain or easier to tap into? Because I know there's a ability to have them in the middle of the street, but there's also a desire sometimes to have them offset from, say, the curb gutter, you know, off the sidewalk.
I don't know, I mean, it's so varied in a city like ours, which is, 130 plus years old. It all depends on when something was built, how they proceed at that
Utilities are
time.
everywhere, I feel like is what I have learned in projects. There is no rhyme or reason.
Did we find new utilities when we tore up Euclid? Like there was.
Oh my gosh, there was multiple water mains, Denver Water was like, that's not ours, and they were like, actually, yes it is.
So Derek, what's useful here? Now, we're trying, I think we're supposed to use this time, right, to kind of pull
Yeah.
together how we're speaking to council about it. So, I guess, what of all the points on here?
Well, I'm just trying to answer Robert's question, which I
Yeah.
don't think we got an answer for.
How to answer those talking, correct. But then I said, do we have to have them for the presentation? He said, not
No, I
necessarily.
don't think we have to, but I think we have to be prepared as we move
Yeah.
forward, particularly with whatever we do on a lottie.
And I will, sorry, I will say, this wasn't one of Robert's points, but I think it's something that is going to get asked is the maintenance side. And I think, for a lottie, we are prepared that our grounds crew would plow and sweep that area, right? So we're not necessarily putting that back onto homeowners to have to maintain that.
Right.
So yeah, if, I think any future implementation of this would also be maintained by city crews.
But to answer your question, Kelly, it's, do you feel that this is a good summary on the data points that we want to see when we discuss sidewalks, or do you want to see some things changed, adjusted, or did we miss something you think we should?
Yeah, I appreciate, I guess it's how far ahead do we want to try to get of those questions? I think there's a place to position that we've had dialogue, but fair to also say, we don't have the exact answer here and now, and we'll advocate and be a part of continuing conversation to find the right solution.
It's safe to say that we would never block a legal driveway, of course, right? But a temporary design may remove parking, but a permanent design may add it back.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah, we're still in the
Step is
camp.
still worth it.
Yeah, we're still in the camp, benefit is greater than, and while there, of course there will be hiccups, right? We generally foresee them to be a smaller bucket than,
But that's also the
rest of
pilot project approach. We can try it in an isolated area without changing how everything is. If a solution is found, sometimes if you try something, you find a solution you didn't expect to, or maybe a challenge that appeared that it was anticipated.
And I think too, but this is more of a broad brush. So there's always gonna be specifics where it's not gonna work.
Well, and I think this is also prioritizing safety over parking. But I don't know if that's like a good talking point necessarily with, council.
Be a way to have everything in the conversation. Because if we prioritize one thing and exclude another, you are effectively alienating citizens who may want to see a different set of priorities.
Right.
We have to consider them in vision. There's got to be a path that gives you safety, but also gives them service. And if we don't do that, then there will be extreme opposition and extreme conflict with the citizenry.
Referring to it as like a complete street, I feel like, rings a little bit better to councils and I don't know, it could sway minds. Cause we're leaning more towards like a complete street system, especially on an area where you're a safe route to school for 3 schools, actually 4.
But I could say that, that's already been championed by city staff, would I? Correct. Like a complete street.
Complete street system.
But this is continuing the delivery of it.
Right, this is like the implementation of that philosophy.
We're really trying to challenge them to prove like a metal.
Incremental complete streets. Also, it's a great way to provide study information to see if you increase bike traffic, especially to all the schools, but also just for any neighbors in that area. That'd be a great way to study. If you build it, they will come. The Trail of Dreams.
I do think that our stance should be that while a temporary design may remove parking temporarily, that does not necessarily reflect that the final design would not have parking on both sides of the street.
That
Would that be accurate?
You throw in words like possibly and could, sure.
But potentially, because, you know, if you reconstruct the whole roadway and you're moving that curb out, right, to build like a off-street shared use path, right? You eliminate the need for that buffer space. Well, you want to have a buffer space. And, you know, have an amenity zone and a tree lawn, and there's all the other like benefits from that. Technically, you can have like an attached shared use path on the roadway, right? And so you are using less space overall in like a permanent example. So there could be space depending on the
example, but might use the existing sidewalks as part of their 10-foot space. And so that gives you 3 feet, so you're only taking up 7 feet now. And so that parking could potentially come back in the final.
What are you gonna answer when city council asks you, so you're proposing a 10-foot shared use path on one side of the street, what's on the other side of the street?
Unfortunately, it's the crappy sidewalks we have for the other entire
So
city.
the answer is to keep it at the 2'7".
Yeah, because this is temporary. We're not asking for a capital improvement project. It's,
So, to be clear, so you're asking to do similar what we're proposing for Eladi, where it's in the existing curb to curb. Okay. I was going off of what you meant for the ultimate solution, what that looks like, because once you start moving curbs,
Right.
Yeah.
Any
Doesn't matter how
ultimate
far you move
solution
them.
will have ADA compliant sidewalks on
yes.
Right.
on both sides, one of which would be a large shared use path, the other one would be like the minimum of 5 foot
And
typically.
now we spent the money on collecting data. We know people use this, or maybe it's too wide, or maybe it's too thin, before we go through and pour concrete.
Because like Eladi, for example, at some point, it's gonna have to be torn down and rebuilt back up just by age of the infrastructure. Eventually, all your concrete's gonna get beat up really bad, your subgrade's gonna get beat up really bad, and a full rebuild will have to happen at some point. And
maybe not. I mean, yeah, I get what you're saying. That is true in the life cycle, the overall life cycle, but the way that our CIP group tries to maintain our roadways and stuff, they try and do incremental steps to keep it living as long as possible, if you want to think, in a good condition. Which is a lot of the stuff we see out there, the surface seals and stuff like that we put out there.
And that is just good stewardship of the infrastructure we have, but realistically, infrastructure every about 30 to 50 years will hit an end of life cycle.
And the problem with that is the cost is exponentially more expensive to rebuild a roadway versus to seal a roadway or even do a mill and overlay. once you're going all the way down into the sub base and redoing all that, yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone saw it.
Plus.
Yeah, we did it on Bemis a couple of years ago. That was a good example, and it's also the time, right? How long it takes to rebuild a road like that too. Correct. That's a lot to it.
We just rebuilt how many stormwater culverts because they hit end of life because the corrugated metal pipe rusted.
It's all failing, yeah.
But those took literally almost 2 years to complete a majority of those.
Oh, we're
Not
not
the
even
majority.
close. We're so far from getting those all done, but.
That's a good example of like just something that's just enough wide for, 10, 20 feet. It's taken many, many years and many, many millions of dollars. Doing a street is gonna be that multiplied. But we still wanna have a vision for when that next 20 or 30 years happens and, say some of those streets do happen. Where does this ultimately end up in the vision? So, okay, just being respectful of time, if anybody has any thoughts as they kind of chew on this and stuff, shoot it over to myself in an email. And we'll make sure that we get it incorporated and stuff. So like, we still have some time, but we want to make sure that we kind of go through what it is, talk it through and just make sure we're all on the same page and have a unified voice.
I do have one, when we're talking about the trail system, we're not talking about necessarily the dedicated bike lanes, right? Okay, good, because two-way on if you're hauling, not a good idea to put it all on the same side of the street because the cars will see you coming. And
That would be an adventure.
it would be an adventure. I just want to make sure that that's not part of the equation.
Okay, the next part is gonna be, that we're gonna present is gonna be on transit, and I know that one of the priorities is a percolator system in Littleton that serves Littleton. And we wanna see something that actually is implemented, as we were just talking about, RTD is pulling back another 20% of their routes, and who knows before we have no mass transit. RTD, and, as the citizens of Littleton is like, redevelopment, densification. People that wanna come here and enjoy it, and there's been challenges like the brewery that everybody parks on all the full streets. But like mass transit might be able to help bring solutions for that. For people that have mobility challenges, we've had many active citizens speaking on that, and getting something going is gonna be just as critical as identifying something that will tie into like, it could be Littleton Centennial, a system that gets people to the medical facilities, to the schools, to the shopping areas. That could also help with like last mile transit and everything, but we just don't have anything right now that is serving some of the most vulnerable citizens. Or even just the people that see an advantage to mass transit and say they want to go to the rail station to go take the train to downtown. It's very difficult unless they do it themselves. So we want to recommend that something is started and that you look for a commitment.
So just that this is posing the fixed route.
Yes.
And I know we spoke about, right, wanting our cake and to eat it too. And that, right, having the fixed route circulator and an enhanced and improved on-demand service. I just want to make sure, so when we address it to council, we're only planning to speak to the circulator.
The circulator, and then we will kind of end it with like wanting to see kind of like what the evolved system could be and stuff like that, because a small solution is great, but it doesn't fix a systemic problem. And we always have to keep the big picture in mind as we look at the little picture. But taking a step, bringing the solution gets us progress towards leading the big
And then Arapago is working on.
Yeah, well, I think that's a good point. So yeah, the Arapago project is recommending a on-demand service, right? That's right. Which is like what Douglas County has.
We should probably make mention.
I feel like that should be noted, right?
I would
Right.
agree.
So yeah, maybe this section has two parts, right? And I do think we should call out specifically, or you should call it specifically, you know, this is fixed route transit system. I think we should say if it's a circulator, call it a circulator. Otherwise, I think a fixed route transit system lends itself to like a typical RTD bus route, which I don't think is what we're recommending. And then there could be another section about the specific on-demand door-to-door service, where a circulator would not be door-to-door, right? You're gonna find stops that you would still have to get to that stop.
Yes.
But could function like the shopping cart or, you know, whoever the powers that be decide what the stops are and where it goes.
So should we not use a fixed route transit as our language? Should we not use circulator? Like, what are we actually asking for? And what is the difference between
I
those?
think we use circulator.
Isn't circulator fixed route?
Circulator is fixed route, but I think having that term circulator in there is different than
Okay.
just, I mean, I guess it's kind of getting into the nuance of it. But I
Okay.
think a circulator is typically you think of like the Inglewood Burt, right? Or smaller, yeah, kind of more defined routes rather than like a long point-to-point bus route, right? And it's also typically different vehicles rather than, you know, a large articulated bus, or a larger bus, you know, would be more of like a passenger van or some sort of trolley, you know, other cities have like, Estes Park has the trolley or Cripple Creek, those types of things. So I guess it could be, but I think defining it as a circulator probably gets it more to where I think what you guys are trying to propose. That makes sense.
And one thing I think is important with the circulator, more of the lessons learned from last time, if you just serve one purpose with the circulator, you quickly will hit a maximum capacity of that where it gets hard to have it evolve. But having a circulator that can serve multiple purposes, though, like say there's a big event in Littleton for a downtown thing, and we want to have a circulator bringing people to the downtown event, but not everybody can flow. Or say there's like various festivals, or like say the colleges there, or say like maybe the schools and rails are looking for something. You know, there's multiple solutions will allow the most vulnerable citizens to get the service, but also allow it to be viable and serve other city needs too.
So we should amend our note, because we only have circulator on there as a negative connotation, call the shopping cart a circulator. But we should also say that we're asking for a circulator fixed route.
I guess I'm a little. The circulator, yes, it will help all citizens. I guess in my head, I'm like, I don't know that it's necessarily the solution for our most vulnerable. That would be the on
On-demand.
demand.
Absolutely.
So that, again, nuance, but yeah, that's just why I was getting a little confused
Yeah,
on
and
it.
I think that the best solution for them is like something that's reliable, but something that can also serve like odd situations that can't be planned for, because I know that like there's a lot of vulnerable citizens that having a routine allows them to better structure their life, and having something very reliable.
Sure, no, there's definitely a benefit and a value to the
So that's
circulator. Yes, yes.
And that's why like we have to have something, but it's gotta go towards a whole solution of like, it can't be the only solution. And I think that's something that was a challenge to the previous system, was it was presented as the only solution, and it really hit its limits of what it could really do very quickly.
Yeah. So it's a circulator to be ideally supplemented by what
Yes.
forward with the Arapago, and that plus Littleton outright owning it, we are flexible to, you know, change the route for given events or other, you know, points where we think.
Can LPS be wrapped into this as well for extra events or night things or whatever activities, be it, you know, recital nights where parking's a premium, get people the opportunity to have exposure that have a car, or I don't know, I think it would hit
I don't see why not.
There's like a game at Littleton High
Yeah.
School, like how can we?
How can we get it from Littleton Brewery back to the stadium?
Yeah.
It's a high school game.
I like from Andy's, Custer.
There you go.
What about the
But
adults?
it's like if people or organizations or institutions like the schools could apply, like, hey, we would like the circulator for this event. Hey, we would like it for the Hudson Gardens thing. Hey, we would like it for the Breckenridge Brewery event. Hey, we would like it for this.
Yeah,
I think it could have more buy-in and then it could still be supported for more in need or most in need.
Yeah.
And it serves and it continues in popularity and people want to continue to vote for it because it's a thing they see and use.
I think that's great. We used to, that, like, using words instead of like a circulator, but instead of a line or a loop, like the Littleton loop or like the Littleton trolley line or something. I think helps people understand what kind of route it is. Did you say we have two already? 2 buses?
Decrepit.
The omnibuses, we do have 2 omnibuses. They're
Aging.
yeah, about to age out.
And we're just conceptualizing a plan, but I don't know if this helps, but especially for events, a widely used bus system for like downtown Littleton events, what I think, as long as people know it's gonna happen and it's provided annually for certain events, will help with parking and traffic for sure. I know in St. Louis, when I lived there, if you went to any of the restaurants or bars on a certain street, you got picked up by a bus and everyone went to a Cards game. And it was just so easy and nobody drove and nobody parked. So, and that, I think it was called the Loop. And that was wonderful.
I think it also mentally changes the way people think about it downtown. Like, people complain about parking around Littleton Brewery, but if you go literally 1 block over, there's nobody parked there. It's, they just wanna park on the one street.
Across the street.
Yeah, across the street, plenty of parking. There's a crosswalk now. And so I think that also changes the mentality of people in a town when they know there's a bus that connects them to their things that, oh, I can park in downtown and get to Littleton Brewing and get.
I mean, town hall nights, you know.
Yeah.
And
Sales and
downtown to
I
this.
think there's an economic development element to this whole thing.
But it
Absolutely.
needs to be reliable, something that I can actually use.
Reliable and anticipated for especially Littleton events too. Cause I love the connecting LPS would be amazing.
So I'm gonna throw the devil's advocate out.
Yeah.
So RTD is now proposing to cancel the 16th Street Mall, which is exactly what we've
Yep.
Really?
done. They need to save $62 million, and so that's one of the things that is on the chopping.
Highest ridership line.
Yep, they are talking about cutting that.
So it's also probably also their biggest problem line because of the people on the line. And yeah, so it's just an inequity thing that they're gonna do.
I agree, but I'm just saying, I'm sure that there are members of council that may have seen the same article in the Denver Post and would raise the
I don't
issue.
get opposed to anybody, but
Well, and
we'll see something about that.
one thing that.
But the difference is that we're proposing a transit system that we own.
Yes.
And that's the difference.
And I just, one thing that,
Well, it's where we're relying on a jurisdiction that's run out of money. This will all depend on Costco. This will be just dependent on Costco.
The circulator will go from Costco to downtown, to Littleton High School. We figured it out in this meeting.
On the bus.
Hot dogs.
Sure.
Awesome. And every month, every week we give away a chicken.
There you go.
Well, it's fine. When we present it at council, Josh is gonna dress up as a trolley conductor anyway, so.
I'll start growing my mustache.
All right.
I definitely think that Kenna's right, that there has to be like a downtown development and increase in sales element to this that
Yeah.
and also better parking situations.
It alleviates a lot of issues.
Yeah.
I love what Robert's saying too. It's like, we own it. That's really what we're saying. We own it. We can do whatever we want with it.
Right.
But we should just make it a priority that it's part of what Littleton provides.
So what I'm gonna take to the thing on Monday is don't consolidate all those bus stops, because we're gonna have some place to get stopped.
Well, and one thing that I hear, because I get to travel all around, is mass transit in Denver specifically is something that people are disappointed in significantly. And other communities like Chicago, New York, Boston, Atlanta, even Dallas, like have systems that are much better than what we see here. And the one thing that is shown in every one of those communities, those systems provide tremendous public benefit. And that is kind of, I think, what the overall goal is to benefit all the citizens with more than just one flavor of travel. So I guess, and the same thing, if people chew on this, have extra input, extra things, shoot it over to me. But the last subject is kind of like the big hook here is how do we pay for it? Because everything unfortunately does cost dollars, and just taking sidewalks, $100,000 does very little to address the problem. But say larger amounts, like say in millions or something like that, would allow actual realizable changes to be implemented, even if it would take 50 years. At $100,000, we're probably looking at what, 500 years to catch up, if we're lucky.
Well, then just gotta start all over.
Yeah. So, and there's like, different things, like you probably have heard like some of the programs, like we had 3A, which did a tremendous amount of benefit to the capital projects to making sure that we had money for just public projects, period. But it's a step, but we still gotta get many other steps. And if these programs are gonna be actually realized, we have to go with funding. Now, we could use a pitch like 3A, you know, it could be like strictly for sidewalks. It could be, you know, the bus fund.
Trail and trolley.
Yeah.
Trail and trolley.
Sorry.
You working on
Hey,
it?
I cannot claim that as my own thought. It was like playing with alliterations, like help.
But we do need to get an obligation to fund these things, because otherwise we're talking about a bunch of good ideas and no way to actually make them happen. And we never started from the starting point, which is kind of spinning in the same circle.
I think in the funding section, it does need to be mentioned that taking an incremental approach saves money. You can do things without having to wait for $800 million. Get safety now without having to wait for a final design. Kind of that perfectionism stop, you know, procrastination, perfectionism. So that's the only thing I would say we need to add to funding. Just that the incremental process actually does benefit us by getting the things we want today without having to spend a large amount of money.
Yep, and this also works into things like the CIP plan and like a lot of the future planning, because these things will all be hooked in like the projects, the funding to pay for them, eventually work into budgets, because the city does have to plan many, many years out to make these larger things happen. And even the shorter things have to be planned out, because as we just talked about, you take away people's parking, and they didn't know about it, they're gonna have a lot of feelings. And those feelings are likely to be very negative.
Well, that's another thing that we should say on there is like going through the rental process, you're gonna get data and feedback from citizens that you normally would not get if you just designed and built the final project. And so it ends up making these final projects more palatable and possibly cost less money. So sometimes.
Could we use the city's cooperative funds where they'll help you pay for sidewalk rehabilitation? Could we build off of that in any way, shape, or form?
We were talking about that earlier today, what Englewood does in Denver. I was talking to someone about that. I mean, Englewood started a program now where all the residents, it's almost like a tax that you pay every year towards sidewalks. And that way the city replaces all the sidewalks and stuff, as opposed to how we do it, where it's really the owner's responsibility for the sidewalk in front. We have had a program in the past, I don't know if it still exists or not, where it's 50-50, where the city takes half the cost, but that's still quite a burden on a homeowner that's not expecting a cost to replace sidewalk and stuff.
Yeah,
You probably have to fund it a lot more extensively if you're talking about building new sidewalks and stuff.
I'm
Not
just
just
wondering if
repairs.
there's a way to help fund some of the trail expansion, if you will, in some of the neighborhoods where there is no sidewalk or the sidewalk is absolutely trashed and they're legally obligated to repair that. And so there is already a mechanism within the city that potentially could
But like if,
get you a couple of.
but if I use that, like in front of my house, wouldn't I just be putting in the 31-inch sidewalk?
But that's my question is, can we then go to the?
Yeah, how do you do that incrementally?
Can we do
I don't think you can use that exact program, but you could create another one.
something?
A separate fee or tax to live in the city that eventually puts money into this pot that you use for certain things.
I think the piece to that though is, I don't think we could, I think anything that that type of funding would be used for would have to be ADA compliant,
Oh, absolutely.
which
Or
the
the expandable.
on-street, non-motorized space that we're talking
Yeah.
about, right, is not necessarily meeting all ADA requirements. The big thing that we've run into with that is the cross slopes of the roadway. There's very specific cross slopes for sidewalks. Has to be less than 3%, 2%. And with roadway crowns and or for drainage, that would be really hard to.
We might be able to use it too, because the current program excludes HOAs and commercial. And so if we develop a new one based on the old program that brought that in, it might get us some stuff in some side areas. Not specifically residential, but where we have this sort of mixed use conglomeration.
Derek, we're at 3 minutes to.
Yes. So the same thing, kind of like everybody, send me any other thoughts that you guys have stuff, and I will get incorporated. But this is the presentation to council that we will do. At the end, we'll just kind of summarize what we talked about, which is kind of the last bullets. And just a statement that, hey, thank you, this is the board, here's what we do, thank you for listening to us. Great stuff like that.
I just followed that. We do want to make sure that we make mention of Arapago and the service. We had circulated language in a positive light, and we put language that we own this program for the transit. And I think that was the thoughts that I caught on that. So that's okay.
The only other edit I had in the memo is there's something about the current system, you have to use a smartphone. There are other ways if you don't own a smartphone.
If you could just update what those are in that. I'm summarizing a lot of things.
You should put a QR code in the lobby of these places so they can get that information.
We have a hotline.
When was the last time the TMB spoke to council?
2024.
So there's 2 members who've never met. So I would encourage you to consider just 3 minutes on kind of who you are. I mean, we selected new members, so we did that. But they're, you know, kind of just, this is what we're working on, this is who we are. And even these are kind of our interests. I think valuable for the council people who don't know you. It'd be valuable for the council people who do know you.
Absolutely.
For just real quick, for funding, are we like listing any ideas that we had?
We are, but like what we're gonna put in the letter is the idea summation. Like we don't want to go into detail, but like, especially if the idea has a hook, something like that, you know, like Arapago.
We're at 8:30, we're gonna finish these last things.
Yeah, so we're at a time when we do have a couple things in staff comments. We'll say if anybody needs to have please let me know. And if so, I will send out an email to everybody. I do want to get everybody's input on the boat law situation. And I would like to present a recommendation on what our stance would be about that. If you guys could send me like a paragraph on your thoughts on what you guys have garnered from the citizens and.
Eight.
That would be very helpful, and I'm gonna put together an independent small recommendation to council of just like, this is what our stance is, and this is, what TMB would like to see pursued in regards to that.
We don't, on the staff side, we don't really have any updates on the BOR situation.
Still a
It's
situation.
in legal's hands.
The drones haven't arrived yet.
I'm not aware of that yet.
And do you guys have any quick updates on staff comments?
Yes, so I think I'd sent an email prior, I think there was a discussion at the last meeting about volunteer opportunities, so here's a link to Eliminate Littleton. However, I don't know if they're still taking volunteers as it is tomorrow. Hope to see you all there. TMP update, we have gone through interviews and I've selected a consultant. I'm not at will to say who it is, as we are still going through contracting. But the plan is to give a little update about the TMP contract at the September 8th study session. We're just calling that a night of transportation. So luckily you all will be first on the agenda. You will be, and Robert, get to be there, however late. So you'll hear more there, on that date. Alati corridor study, this date is out of date and I don't have a new date for you. So it's being pushed back, but it might happen the same night, it might happen a different night, to give the final recommendation on that. Field trip dates, I think we don't need to go into this right now. I think we can focus on this on the next meeting. But we always have a field trip on a Saturday, typically morning, to go around to different project sites. We use one of our lovely omnibuses. And either Tim drives or Shane drives. So we'll look at dates for that to see what works with the board next month. And then the Blueprint Boulevard Urban Design Charrette, hopefully Dave and Josh, you will both be there next week. We'll also be there, so you get to hang out with us some more. You are gonna be there.
Council representative.
Amazing.
And you're going too, Derek, right?
Yeah, I'll be there.
Perfect.
I'll be there Monday.
Should be fun. I'm excited. Lots of ideas. We have. That's all I have. And then, yeah, just, we need slides from this group by, August 14th.
So I have a quick question on that with Cora. Can we coordinate the slide presentation and a Microsoft Outlook full-blown email chain, or does that violate open meeting laws? And Aaron, you're the expert, right?
If we have a mass email, yes.
It violates open meeting laws, or it's just subject to,
Everything's subject to course.
yeah, it's subject to Cora, so like.
I don't know. I can follow up with Colleen. I think the best method was, and I'll let Derek, you kind of handle this. If it's either divvy up of who's doing slides, just send it all to you and you can compile them.
I think that would be wise, and we can like put the information in people's hands. They can send it back to me.
So you'll just send out a blank copy. We got to work on that.
All right. Are we good? Are we adjourned?
We are adjourned.
Lovely.
I can't believe.
I'm gonna stop recording.
Came over here without any candy.
No,
I see how it is. No, no, no.